faces. She promised the district would cooperate fully with law enforcement and bring in extra counselors to help students process what happened. April Stevens, our school counselor, was already setting up a crisis support center in the library with folding tables and boxes of tissues. Within an hour, the line of students waiting to talk stretched down the hallway and around the corner. They had to call in counselors from 3 other schools just to handle everyone who needed help. I walked past the library and saw kids sitting in circles crying while counselors handed out water bottles and tried to keep everyone calm. Outside the main entrance, Chuck Hodges from Channel 7 News had set up his camera and was trying to grab students for interviews as they left the building. Parents started showing up and formed a human wall, blocking him from getting near any kids. The school went into modified lockdown with nobody allowed in except students, staff, and parents with proper ID. Chuck kept shouting questions at people, but the parents stood shoulder to shoulder refusing to let him through. My phone buzzed and I saw Sophia had finally texted me back after being silent since yesterday. Just 3 words that made my stomach drop. I feel dirty. I texted back asking if I could see her or if she wanted to talk, but she replied that she needed time alone to process everything. I understood, but it hurt knowing she was going through this, and I couldn't help her. The FBI tech specialist arrived that afternoon in a black SUV and went straight to the main office with 2 other agents carrying computer equipment. They spent hours going through Mom's evidence, and the specialist confirmed everything she had found, plus discovered something worse. Martin hadn't just been selling basic access, but had been offering premium packages where subscribers could request specific girls or specific angles. Several students threw up when word spread about what that meant, and more parents showed up to pull their kids out of school immediately. Brody Nichols found me at my locker and told me his mom was on the school board and had known about previous complaints against Martin. She had dismissed them as disgruntled employee gossip and never investigated further. Now the board was facing serious questions about what else they had ignored or covered up over the years. 3 more girls came forward that day, saying they had noticed their gym clothes moved around in their lockers or items going missing. One girl said her sports bra disappeared twice, and she thought she was just being forgetful. The investigation expanded as detectives realized the cameras might have been just one part of what Martin had been doing. They started interviewing every female student who had PE or used the locker rooms in the past year. 2 days later, the news showed Martin's wife outside the courthouse filing for divorce and a restraining order against him. She told reporters she had no idea what her husband had been doing and was horrified to learn the truth. Their teenage daughter had already transferred to another district, and I felt terrible for her having to deal with this. Nobody deserved to have their dad turn out to be a monster who hurt kids. Dallas Curry, this expensive defense lawyer Martin hired, held a press conference on the courthouse steps, claiming Martin had mental health issues and needed treatment, not prison. The victim families who were watching erupted in anger, with one mom screaming that it was disgusting excuse-making for a predator. Ashlyn's mom was crying and yelling that her daughter had tried to hurt herself because of what Martin did. Detective Gomez called Mom that evening with more bad news about the investigation. He had discovered Martin used school funds to buy the cameras by claiming they were for security equipment on the purchase orders. The Financial Crimes Unit was joining the investigation to add embezzlement charges on top of everything else. Martin had stolen money meant for textbooks and computers to buy cameras to spy on kids. The detective said with federal charges for distributing across state lines, plus the embezzlement, Martin was looking at spending the rest of his life in prison. Mom hung up the phone and just sat at the kitchen table staring at nothing while I made her eat something since she hadn't had a real meal in days. The whole town was talking about the scandal, and every day brought new horrible details about what Martin had done. Parents were organizing meetings to demand answers from the school board about how this could have happened for 6 months without anyone noticing. Students were walking around school like zombies, nobody could focus on classes, and teachers didn't even try to give real lessons. Everyone was just trying to get through each day, while the investigation kept expanding, and more victims kept coming forward with stories about Martin that made everyone sick. The school called an emergency parent meeting for that Thursday night, and the gym was packed with angry parents demanding answers about how this could happen for 6 months without anyone knowing. I sat in the back row with Mom while parents took turns screaming at the school board members who looked like they wanted to disappear into the floor. Alexa Pritchard stood up halfway through and announced she was organizing a lawsuit against the whole school district for failing to protect our kids. The room erupted, with some parents yelling that lawsuits would just hurt the school more, while others shouted that the district needed to pay for letting this happen. Parents started pushing and shoving each other while arguing about whether to sue or focus on healing, and the meeting ended with people literally screaming in each other's faces while security tried to break up fights. The next morning, our gym teacher got called into the office, and by lunch, everyone knew he'd been suspended pending investigation for not reporting his suspicions about Martin earlier. He pulled me aside after school looking defeated and told me he'd tried to document weird things he noticed, like Martin hanging around the girls' locker room. But when he brought it up to the vice principal, she threatened to fire him for spreading rumors about the principal. He showed me emails he'd saved where she told him to mind his own business unless he wanted to find himself looking for a new job. That same afternoon, Sophia's parents pulled up to the school, and I watched them pack her stuff from her locker into boxes while she stood there crying. She texted me later that night saying she couldn't handle being in the building where it happened, and her parents were starting homeschooling immediately. I told her I understood, but it felt like I was losing her when she needed support the most, and I didn't know how to help from a distance. 3 days later, the news announced that Assistant DA Michaela Brady was taking over the case and charging Martin with 47 counts, including production of child pornography. She held a press conference explaining that each count carried up to 20 years in prison, which meant Martin could get 940 years total and would definitely die behind bars. The school board met that weekend and decided to install new security cameras in all the hallways, but these were big visible ones that everyone could see. They also announced that every single staff member had to undergo new background checks immediately, even if they'd worked there for decades. Several teachers resigned in protest, saying they were being treated like criminals when they hadn't done anything wrong, and one teacher said it was insulting to be investigated just because Martin was a monster. Mom started getting phone calls at all hours with people breathing heavy or whispering threats, and one morning we found a brick through our front window with a note saying, "She ruined an innocent man's life." The police put a patrol car outside our house 24/7, but I couldn't sleep knowing there were people out there who wanted to hurt my mom for protecting kids. 2 weeks into the investigation, the FBI called a press conference announcing they'd arrested 3 of Martin's subscribers in other states. One was a middle school teacher in Texas, another was a youth baseball coach in Florida, and the third was a daycare worker in Ohio, which made parents nationwide start demanding better screening for anyone who worked with kids. The Texas teacher had been watching the feeds during his lunch breaks at his own school, and investigators were now checking if he had cameras in his school too. Tyler came to the school the next Monday with his knuckles all wrapped up, and I found out he'd beaten the crap out of some kid who made a joke about the cameras in front of him. He got suspended for 3 days, but nobody blamed him for snapping because his sister Ashlyn had tried to kill herself over the weekend and was in the ICU. She'd taken a whole bottle of her mom's pills and left a note saying she couldn't live knowing strangers had watched her change for gym class every day. Tyler's family was falling apart, and his dad had to take time off work to stay at the hospital while his mom wouldn't leave Ashlyn's bedside. Meanwhile, emails surfaced showing the school board president had told Martin to handle things quietly when concerns were first raised about him hanging around the locker rooms too much. The local news got hold of the emails where she literally wrote that they needed to avoid any scandal that might hurt the school's reputation or affect property values in the district. She resigned immediately, but 3 other board members were also in those email chains, and parents were demanding they step down too, with emergency elections scheduled for next month. Martin's preliminary hearing finally happened 3 weeks after his arrest, and the courtroom was packed with victims' families and reporters. The prosecutor revealed they'd traced Bitcoin payments now, and Martin had actually made over $50,000 total from selling access to watch our classmates. The judge reviewed all the evidence, including the camera purchase records, the server logs Mom had found, and testimonies from 12 different girls who'd been recorded. Martin sat there in his orange jumpsuit crying and shaking, while his lawyer tried to argue for bail, but the judge called him a clear danger to minors and denied it immediately. Martin completely broke down sobbing when the judge said he'd stay in jail until trial and had to be dragged out of the courtroom by guards while parents clapped. The next few weeks dragged by with everyone at the school walking around like zombies, and I kept checking my phone hoping Sophia would text me back, but she never did. Alexa organized a victim support meeting at the community center, and when I walked in, I saw Sophia sitting in the back row with her arms wrapped around herself looking at the floor. I tried to catch her eye, but she wouldn't look up, and when Alexa started talking about healing and moving forward, Sophia just stared at her hands folded in her lap. Other girls were crying and hugging each other, but Sophia sat there like a statue, and when the meeting ended, she got up fast and headed for the door. I followed her out calling her name, but she walked faster, and when I touched her shoulder, she pulled away and kept walking to her mom's car without saying a word. The IT specialist called Mom the next day, saying he'd found something huge on Martin's computer and needed her to come to the station right away. When she got back, she looked sick and told me Martin had been planning to help 2 other principals install cameras in their schools, and they'd already ordered the equipment. The FBI arrested both principals that same day and found cameras already installed in one school's locker room that had been recording for 2 weeks. Mom had to testify before the grand jury, and she was gone for 6 hours while I sat in the courthouse hallway, playing games on my phone, trying not to think about what they were asking her. She came out looking exhausted with dark circles under her eyes, but she grabbed my shoulders and said they had everything they needed to put Martin away for life. The next Monday, over 500 students walked out of class, demanding the rest of the school board resign for ignoring warnings about Martin. We marched to the district office chanting and holding signs while news crews filmed everything, and this time the adults actually listened instead of telling us to go back to class. 3 more board members announced they were stepping down by the end of the day, and the superintendent promised new safety rules would be in place within a week. That night, Martin's mother went on the news claiming my mom had hacked into her son's computer and planted all the evidence to frame him. Mom's lawyer sent her a letter the next morning, saying if she kept lying about us on TV, they'd sue her for everything she had. The gym teacher came back to work after investigators proved he'd tried to report Martin 3 times, but got threatened with losing his job each time. He stood in the hallway between classes with tears in his eyes, telling every girl who walked by that he was sorry he didn't do more to protect them.